Welcome to TippCast by the Nenagh Guardian. Hello and welcome to episode 5 of TippCast by the Nenagh Guardian. Myself, Shane Stapleton, Shane Brophy there in the middle, and commentator Killian Whelan. How are you doing, man?
Good to see you, Shane.
Good to talk to you, man.
Good stuff. Right, we've loads to get through this week. The Tipperary Camogie team, the ladies football team, the hurlers and the footballers as well, of course. But we'll start off with the Camogie team because, you know, last weekend, obviously, you know, we can talk about the results and all that, and we definitely will. But a massive blow to Tipperary Camogie with the news that Clodagh Quirke sustained a cruciate knee injury. That's going to require surgery. That is a massive blow, Shane.
Yeah, it is. Like, not. I think for it's the second time it's happened, and she's one of the more experienced players in that squad, which is pretty young. There's no doubt for her personally, it's a massive blow, and I suppose for a team that a defensive unit that has been molded together by Bill Mullaney over the last 12 to 18 months, to lose one of their central cogs is a big blow, and it probably removes that maybe element of flexibility they had maybe to change things around if they could, but to lose a player that can probably play a cornerback, wing back, centre back is a massive blow.
Yeah, and there's been plenty of injuries for different teams and in all codes in the last number of weeks, Killian. Like, we've seen plenty of it, and it's tough on players, and it's even a gamble for managers every week because they're not quite sure how much can players take.
Yeah, well, I imagine, you know, you've gone away and you've done your bit in the COVID and you're being tracked by your personal trainer or whoever's keeping an eye on this, your S&C guys, and he's getting the feedback, and, you know, players, I would imagine, are being as 100% truthful as they can, but until you're back in the contact scenario and back on the pitch, you know, it's only then that they can be judged. Then you're putting them back out into top class matches and up against, you know, opposition that are as good, if not better than them, and challenging them in that scenario. You're talking about the physical encounters, and we know obviously the Camogie rules have been changed slightly. The physicality element has definitely increased, and you know, it would seem anyway. I was on the far side of the pitch to where Clodagh Quirke suffered that injury, but you knew she had suffered an injury, and a serious one straight away. But it looked a fairly innocuous enough challenge. But, you know, it seems to me that whatever way in the challenge she planted her foot, that seems to have been where the damage then ultimately was done. And, you know, that's obviously hard then, as Shane has already alluded to. But, yeah, look, we've seen it in other camps. We've heard of other long-term injuries across all the sports and all the codes. And it obviously has to be a factor, Shane. You know, you're doing individual stuff. You know, you're tempering it off a little bit. If you're feeling a twinge, you're probably going to, you know, it depends on who you are as a person. I suppose you play it through it, or you ease off on it. It's only then when you're being pushed in a team situation, well, then that's maybe where the scenario changes, and that's maybe where injuries have come a cropper a bit.
And you've probably seen a nice few teams at this point. Where do you think Tipperary are in the pecking order? We know that the quarter-final weekend is coming up. Tipperary against Offaly, Kilkenny against Limerick. So by virtue of Tipp's performance against Watford, with Cork also beating Watford, we know Tipperary are through. But where do you reckon Tipperary are in the lay of the land?
Well, look, you're in a situation, Shane, that, you know, last year they got to a league final and didn't get to play it. And I think that irks them a little bit still. And, you know, I think within the squad, I think there's a scenario where they want to get back to that. And, you know, I'd give them every chance of getting back to competing at the league final level. Tipperary, I would feel this year, if you were to grade them where they are, you know, you're looking at Bill Mullaney's effectively third season, and they need to be getting into the final four and possibly into the final two now of the championship. So they need to be upsetting one of the big three. They're not in the big three yet. You know, you have your Cork, you have your Kilkenny, and you have your Galways, and Tipp are knocking on those three. And on their day, all going well, Tipperary can be as good as any one of them. It just needs an awful lot to happen for them, I would think, on the day. So Tipperary, to me, are not far off it. They're probably at 3.5 or thereabouts. They're not number 4 anymore. I think they're just getting, you know, as I said, they can upset one of those big three on the day. That Clodagh Quirke injury now is going to, I think, cause a little bit of a change in tact, because I talked about this with a couple of other people, and on another I think it was a local radio I was on the other night, and I was just saying that I reckon that the defence had come down to a scenario where I think Bill Mullaney was quite happy with it, and there mightn't be a whole lot of change between now and championship, and that it was the forwards were going to be the area where you were looking at Roisin Howard coming back in. You imagine Orla Dyers was going to be coming back in, that, yeah, there was positions for them to be put into there, because maybe the 6 forwards hadn't really nailed down their jersey. Now all of a sudden you have Clodagh Quirk, who to me has been one of their mainstays of the 2 matches that they've played, and now it's a problem position all of a sudden. And who's going to be factored in to have to go into that slot?
Yeah, Shane, I mean, we don't know how soon Orla Dyers is going to be back in. She's only after returning from Australia, and maybe there's protocols to be followed. We just don't know, and we won't really speculate on that. But you've talked about the versatility of Clodagh, and, you know, maybe Orla is going to come back into the team as well. Will there be a bit of a rejigging anyway?
I don't think so. I suppose the management would probably have always planned that they would have Orla Dwyer back at some stage. Like, I suppose they were hoping maybe after last year that maybe a bit of run with bad luck and injuries might have moved on, but obviously that hasn't been the case. I know I mentioned that I think in the cast a couple of weeks ago that they could have maybe push maybe Karen Kennedy up the field if they feel that they're still a bit deficient in the forwards. And I know Carthy is still playing as well as ever, like 12 points out of the 216 against Waterford. And I know it's risky to probably put it all on her shoulders, but look, she's so good. If you can feed her enough of the ball, she'll beat most defences on her own. I suppose that was the thing that, as Killian said, it's adding to the attack is where Tipp has been short the last couple of years. And I suppose it's something to maybe ask Killian from, I know he commentated on Tipp's 2 games so far, do you feel that Tipp are addressing some of those forward issues that maybe was what was holding them back maybe the last year or two?
Yeah, well, you know, like anyone would know at this point that Carthy is a serious operator and would be playing in any of the intercounty setups. And there's probably 1 or 2 other Tipp forwards that would be. The problem was the others that were stepping up alongside to take some of the pressure. Now, you would have to say that, you know, Clodagh McIntyre's performance against Waterford the last day would definitely mark her out as somebody that's coming. Nicole Walsh seems to be, you know, maybe turning in a bit of a season, has definitely taken on, I would think, a leadership role very much in that setup at the moment. And then it was all about, you know, trying to fit some of the other players out of forwards into those positions. And, you know, there was still, to me, 1 or 2 areas that were up for grabs. And that's why, you know, I mentioned, you know, they were hoping, I would imagine, that Roisin Howard would see game time before the end of the league to obviously have her up and running to championship pace. I'd imagine if Orla's back, you know, this weekend is probably going to be too soon. I'd imagine I can't see Tipp losing this weekend, so I would imagine she's going to be considered for semi-final, depending on, as you mentioned already, Shane, protocols and so forth. But as you rightly mentioned there, I would have thought Karen Kennedy, then there was a chance maybe to release her further up the field if there was deficiencies that they weren't still happy with in the forwards, and you're pushing maybe her to the midfield, and you're pushing then maybe, you know, options then in the middle. Maybe Sarah Friday would come back into reckoning, you know, with getting games under her belt and so forth. But now you have a scenario where, has he got to mind the house now? And, you know, I would think Clodagh Quirk is a big loss now in that defensive unit. And, you know, you're already talking about a defensive unit that has seen Mull Ryan drop back into that, has made that full-back jersey her own, and they're a very strong central spine. But that central spine is backed up by a very strong wing defence. And as we mentioned, now there's a vital cog gone out of it. It's going to be interesting to see what rejig, to a sense, is going to take place. I'm not sure you're going to see somebody from the forwards or midfield maybe necessarily drop back. I think maybe the responsibility is going to come on the shoulders of one of the, say, someone from 16 to 20 on the subs bench that may take an opportunity to get in there.
Shane, what do you want to see from the team this weekend?
I suppose I'd like to see like their performances in the 2 games haven't been bad. Like I watched the Cork game in full online a couple of weeks ago, and look, take out the 2 very poor goals they conceded in the first half. Like, it was 114 to 16 points. Like, they were there with Cork. Like, they were as good as Cork. Like, Aisling Thompson caused them problems around the middle of the field, but after that, like, they were as good as Cork. And like, if they can just rectify those technical issues, I think it'll be interesting who is in goals this weekend. Like Anya Slattery was an all-star last year. She started in goals against Cork, made a couple of mistakes. I'm not sure whether Caoimhe Burke was going to get a start against Waterford, or whether they decided maybe that the mistakes were costly and Caoimhe's chance to come in. I think whoever starts this weekend, you probably think is would be slotted in maybe for the semi-final and hopefully a final after that. Like there is underage talent coming through. Like there's the Grace O'Toole from Newport Ballinhinch, Emer McGrath there as well. Like they Tipp had a very, very good minor team a couple of years ago that were unlucky to lose to Clare in an All-Ireland semi-final, and I think Claudia McIntyre was on that team as well. So look, we'd love to see some of that young talent beginning to bed in, and I'm sure. Look, like no more than any other national league, I think all teams want to get to a final, but you think that carrot is there, 20th of June, Croke Park, one of the test events for COVID, when 3,000 people will be let in. I sort of laughed a little bit when I heard, God, probably you wouldn't get 3,000 people at a normal National Camogie League final, but you think that this will be a test event. I think any of the 6 teams that are left there will want to be there in Croke Park on Sunday week. So I think, I think all 6 teams will be going mad to get to the final this year.
And certainly, Kilkenny are in fairly rude health, beating Offaly 4-21 to 8 points. And I suppose with a resounding defeat like that, is that why you expect Tipperary to win this game this weekend, and maybe not without a whole lot of fuss?
Yeah, partly, but like we would have been going down to Burr last weekend, and you were thinking, in the chat beforehand, that this could be a right encounter, because you're looking at an Offaly team that finished very, very strongly against a Dublin team that are slowly but surely maybe getting back a little bit of their mojo, and who had ran Kilkenny close down in Kilkenny, and Offaly had put Dublin to the sword as such. Now got goals and everything. So people, and I would have talked to a couple of Camogie people around who were kind of saying, Kilkenny are coming down into this game a little bit worried, coming into Burr, what might Offaly might show up. But it's typical Kilkenny. Show no respect, get out, put them down before they ever get any opportunity to get a foothold in the game. 1-5 to a point at the water break, it was game over. And despite the fact that, Offaly and Kilkenny went toe-to-toe to half time, that was done and dusted. You just weren't getting anywhere back in. And to even add insult to injury, Kilkenny then go out and hit 4 points on the bounce in the first 4 minutes of the second half to really confine it. And then the goals, it was always inevitably, I think, going to come. The heads hung a little bit for Offaly. And despite the fact I would think they're in a little bit more rude health than they've been in the last couple of years, tactically, they seem to have a game plan. Susan Erner seems to have a good, strong discipline among the panel. They seem to have got commitment from the girls that would be playing ladies football to either commit to one, or they're working with both of them. And, that has definitely helped the Offaly cause. I think Offaly have to come into this game against Tipperary seen as an opportunity. They might fancy themselves against Tipperary, the rivalry and neighbours and everything like that, they're not going to lie down against them that little bit, that maybe they feel that over the years to be able to give it as much to Tipperary as anybody else. So maybe Offaly will be coming with a bit of renewed vigour. They probably have to come into that game against Tipperary thinking, we can't ship another big beating here, or it's going to impact on our championship. So I'm sure that's what Susan Erner is saying to her Offaly side, that we just can't afford to ship, the goals that we did against Kilkenny. We can't afford to drop the heads the way we did against Kilkenny. So I think you're going to see a different Offaly side. The only thing I think is that it's a young Offaly side. I think Tipp just have that little bit of experience. I think Tipp are I would feel under Bill Maloney are wrapping it up for something big. They have to come this year. There has to be a knocking of one of the big 3. So I think he's not going to take any prisoners against Offaly either. And I think they'll be all out for it. And that's why I think Tipp will beat Offaly. I think it'll be comfortable. I think you'll see a better Offaly performance. But I think Tipp will be in the semi-finals comfortably enough on Sunday evening.
And Shane, it'll be the last time that these teams will be behind closed doors, because there's going to be 100 people allowed into games after the weekend, 200 if there's a capacity of 5,000. So it'll be the last time that they'll be performing more or less behind closed doors. You're expecting them to get it done?
Yeah, I think I do. I'd agree with Killian. I think maybe there's element last weekend at Offaly that they got a lot after beating Dublin, and I think Ronnie Egan was getting a lot of kudos for her scoring prowess for both the ladies footballers and Camogie team the weekend before. Maybe they just took their eye off the ball. Everything seemed to be going well in Offaly men's and women's game, and maybe that the Camogie team were just a team that maybe just got a little sidetracked. As you say, you can't afford to get sidetracked with Kilkenny. They'll blow you away if you're not tuned in, and that was the case. I think we'll see a better Offaly Offaly performance. I know Bill Maloney in the Guardian this week is expecting a completely different Offaly effort. But like I would think, as Killian said, like it's a year where Tipperary have to do something. I know they were unlucky last year that they missed out on the experience of playing in the league final. Like they've. I don't think there'll be any excuses made this year if Tipperary don't get to at least one of the either the league or the All-Ireland final, and I think they'll get to the league semi-final at least this weekend.
And while we're talking about crowds, myself and Shane covering games definitely find it, I'm sure, a little bit odd behind closed doors. You can hear everything. As a commentator doing play-by-play, has it been a bit more of a challenge, Killian?
Absolutely, because from my experience of doing it now, and I'm about 15 years commentating, you often feed off the atmosphere, and if the crowd are celebrating a big score, obviously your emotion, your everything, you get involved, you bring that home to the scenario. Like I just think I'm sure people in Tipperary might remember a commentary I did of Mickey Quinlivan down in Clonmel commercials when they won down in Mallow in the Munster Club final. And we just went to another atmosphere. I think at that stage, if you were doing that behind closed doors, I don't think it would have had the same effect in some ways. You still would have celebrated, but I think the crowd, and then you go to that level. It has been daunting. But look, I know what Shane said there earlier on. Some people might slag you off and say, well, sure, look, you wouldn't have had to deal with too many crowds at the Camogie matches anyway. But it's still nice to have an atmosphere. And, I've been in the Rag in various different places, and, it can be a tight little venue. But when there's a crowd in there can be a right little atmosphere too. And, that has been a bit of a loss.
Okay, so we'll move on to the ladies' football. This weekend, Tipperary will be playing the mighty All-Ireland champions in Dublin. Just to recap on the results from the first two games. Well, the first 2 weeks, I'll give all the results, really. So in the first round, Tipperary lost 3-15 to 2-6 against Cork. Dublin battered Watford the same week. And week 2, Cork and Dublin played out a classic game, which Dublin just edged. And then Tipperary had a 5-goal defeat to Watford, scoring 2 late goals through Roisin Howard. It's been tough enough the first couple of weeks, Shane.
Yeah, it has been. Yeah, and I suppose maybe it was to be a little expected. Like you have a new management team looking to get to know the girls. I know, speaking to Declan Carthy before the campaign, like you can do all the Zoom sessions you want, but there's nothing beats being out in the field with the girls and getting to know them. And look, it's supposed to be a baptism of fire for Declan and his selectors, and I suppose you're not going into a league campaign either, which are strongest hand. Like they lost Samantha Lambert to retirement last year, a huge presence within that dressing room, and like Ashley McCarthy is not back yet. Orla Dyers is only back in the country. There's no guarantee Ashley McCarthy will be fit for the summer. I believe she had a knee operation in Australia a couple of weeks ago, so. Hopefully, maybe she'll be back for the championship. But look, it's a difficult campaign, and then you're thrown into a regional section with Dublin and the 3 in a row champions, 4 in a row champions, and the all-conquering Cork County of a few years ago, and then Watford are traditionally a very, very strong football team. So, look, it's a daunting task to have at this weekend. It's home to Dublin in Semple Stadium. But look, Tipp have got to use this as a preparation for the relegation playoff. Like that's their priority. It'll be interesting to see what Declan Carthy does, whether he shakes up the team and gives a bit more experience to some of the younger players. And like it's still a very, very young squad he has. Like there's an awful lot of them. Even Aisling Maloney, like at 23, she's one of the oldest players in the squad. Like after that, you're talking the likes of Ida Carlin. She's only coming back after 4 years away. She's 30 years of age. Everything else after that is 24, 23, 24, 25 years of age. So look, it's going to be, like I think if you offer Tipperary maybe staying up this year in Division 1, I think that have taken it. And when you look at Division 2 in ladies football, like Division 2 has Armagh in it. Like Armagh got to an All-Ireland semi-final last year and lost to Dublin by a couple of points, and they've Amy Mackin, one of the best players in the country. So it just shows you the level Tipperary are at in Division 1. And look, top level ladies football is so difficult. Like the quality that's there, and look, it's great for Tipperary. They need to be hanging around there as long as they can and playing at that high level. So you just hope from a Tipperary point of view that they perform to a good level this weekend. Look, if they could produce another shock result, like they drew at Dublin in the league last year before lockdown, so if they could produce another performance like that, it'd be super. But you just hope maybe as the year goes on that they'll get a bit more experience, a bit more streetwise, and hopefully be a bit better prepared for the championship.
And Killian, how does Declan Carr approach this game? We all know how fearsome Dublin are, and Shane obviously mentioned the league performance against Dublin last year, but even, you know, Hannah Tyrrell has come in from another coat, hit the ground running, scored 2-7 last week against Cork. You'd imagine like Tipperary are on the home patch, but the big wide open spaces, you'd think Dublin would actually love that. So how do you approach this game?
Yeah, I wouldn't like to be Declan Carr in lots of ways to try and factor this one out, because, you know, as Shane rightly mentioned there, you know, to be put in with Dublin and Cork in an effort to try and establish and hold on to a place in Division 1 wasn't ultimately ideal. I'd imagine he's disappointed with how they performed against Waterford. He has to be, because I would have thought that was the game they were targeting to get a victory or to get something out of. And you know, to kind of ship the loss that they did has to be disappointing. I thought defensively they looked a little bit porous on occasion, and that has to be causing them a little bit of nightmares this week, especially when he's thinking of facing up to Dublin and not only Hannah Tyrrell but all the others that are well able to chip in as well. But yeah, I would think, like Shane, you're maybe trying to utilise some of your panel there. I don't think you're going out into this game thinking of anything else other than these girls getting an opportunity. I don't think he can anyway. I think the form that Dublin are in, you can't be going in there expecting that you're going to lose. You're going to put out your best team, but I think you'd be looking at an opportunity maybe to get a look at some of the other players, because to me, you have to target now the relegation playoff. And the big target would be for Tipperary to stay in Division 1. Shane is dead right. I think that would be the massive achievement to have done that. That's why I think the win, you know, a game against Waterford, that would have been the one to target to make sure that maybe definitely happening. You know, you're going to be coming in now on the back of 3 defeats into a relegation playoff. No offence, I don't think they're going to beat Dublin. That's it. But I don't envy Declan Carr this week and how you've played this out, Shane. I have to say, it's a difficult one.
And Shane, what went wrong against Watford, to your money? I mean, I think most people would accept the defeat to Cork, even if, you know, I'm sure Declan Carr would have liked to run them a little bit closer. But what do you think went wrong against Waterford?
Just from some just reading the report of Thomas Connery, a reporter in The Guardian this week, I suppose he pointed to the fact that it's just the intensity. It's the intensity of senior football. I think they haven't probably adjusted to it yet. I know. I suppose maybe that's a strange thing to say, considering they were so competitive last year. But just maybe we don't know what Declan Carr is focusing on at the moment in terms of the girls. Are they going hard at training maybe to peak during the summer, or maybe have they? I would say that when Declan when I spoke to him, he said he'll try and get Tipp to play the same brand of football. But look, when you're shipping 3-16 and 5-12, like I think for this weekend they've got to be defensively a lot more compact. But look, that's going to be different against a Dublin team who know how to play against teams with mass defences. They're very athletic. And you mentioned Hannah Tyrrell retired from international rugby one week and scores 2-7 ladies for Dublin ladies footballers another week. Like she's some talent. Like, but it'll be an interesting game. Like, it was like I watched the Cork Dublin match last weekend, and what was it? It was 3-7 to 8 points. Cork got 3 goals very quickly and almost got a fourth. And I said, good, Cork have this one. I turned off the channel for 10 minutes to turn back. Dublin were 6 points up. Like, ladies football is very, very streaky. Like, you could hit a purple patch at 2-3, 2-4, because like kickouts don't go very far. And look, I suppose maybe it's the one thing I like about Gaelic football or ladies football is that scores can happen very, very quickly. It's kickouts don't go very far, and if you're not accurate, there's an opposition forward in and goal, and the ball is in the back of the net. Look, Tipperary have like an Ashley Maloney and Roisin Howard. They have 2 of the best forwards in the country. If they can find some way of pressing up an opposition kickouts and maybe playing the game in the opposition half, that would be ideal for them. Like it's like I'd say they're just so young actually in some of the key positions, like Anna Rose Kennedy and Caitlin Kennedy at centre back and midfield. They're 2 of Tipperary's best players, but they're only, I think, 18 and 20 years of age respectively. Like they're going to be fabulous talents. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But like it's a lot different. They're still so young for players that are so good, and you just can't beat experience at this level. And that's where the loss of Sam Lambert and Orla Dyers and Ashley McCarthy are so key, I think, in this tough National League campaign. But look, I think the one benefit, like we were seeing Tipp on the TV a couple of weeks ago, the match is on this weekend on TG Carr, and I just think this massive exposure to football and ladies football in general. And I just hope when the crowds are allowed back, that from what we've seen of Tipp being on the telly, that young girls and their parents are bringing them to the matches, and the same with Camogie going forward, that we're not seeing echoes in stadiums, that we're getting more girls and young guys through the turnstiles to see ladies teams play when this pandemic and the restrictions start to ease.
Yeah, obviously we can't tell much with the past year, but Killian, do you feel in general it's moving that way, of more people go and more of a take-up?
Yeah, well, you would hope that maybe the organisations would see an opportunity. Like I've put a call out to the Camogie Association that there will be 3,000 obviously for the league final, that you would hope that they would maybe utilise an opportunity to get people maybe that necessarily wouldn't go. And that's not to deny maybe an opportunity to people who will be loyal Camogie followers of whatever counties are going to be involved. I think there's a great marketing opportunity across all the organisations to be able to tap into people who, don't forget, haven't been at a game in a long time. So, I think that if it's across the road at this stage to go see it, and it doesn't matter what it would be, it would just be something to get out and experience live action and get to talk to other people and have a bit of banter and a bit of crack and watch something, So I think Camogie ladies football could profit from that if the marketing campaign or promotion was done right among sponsors or among the organisation, whatever. So there's an opportunity on that. Just go back to what Shane said then about Tipp as well, just on the Tipp lady front. I think defensively, yeah, that's where the work is going to have to happen, because I think in the forwards, Tipp don't lack in the forwards. They're well able to get scores, well able to score goals as well. I know Maloney obviously attracts an awful lot of attention, but they do have some other key players that are able to get in and opportunities there. And obviously, Roisin is going to be tying herself between both codes and so forth in the next few weeks, I'd imagine. But they do have quality footballers going forward. I just think defensively, obviously something Declan Carr is going to have to be working on, and maybe you have to give him a bit of free gratis this year. Maybe it's something he'll be putting in place for next year. These girls will have experienced Division 1 and the top level of football, but they've got to stay in Division 1. That to me is going to have to be the target, and they're still on course for that. But obviously, you're running out of games now. The playoff obviously is their final opportunity. I just think maybe it will be an opportunity against Dublin to try out a defensive plan to see would that work, and then maybe it could be utilised further down the road.
And Shane, can you both experiment in terms of like giving younger players a chance and try out a new system, like something very defensive? It might be difficult to try both of those things out, so maybe Declan is going to have to pick one or the other. Yeah,
I'd say for a week to move from a week between Waterford and Dublin, it'll be hard to put a system in place. Like maybe they could sacrifice a forward to put an extra body back in defence. I suppose that's something you could do. And I suppose with the football teams, both men's and women's, transition the ball up the field, maybe having an extra body back there to maybe create overlaps going up the field mightn't do any harm either, particularly as opposition teams are nearly double team and Aisling Maloney anyway, so you could probably afford maybe to have an extra player maybe back the field to help out things. But there's no doubt about it. Like it's probably not the ideal situation Declan Carr would have liked to find himself in when he took on the job. He'd love to have had a proper spring to get to know the girls, bed in there like he's a whole new management team trying to get to know the situation. But look, it won't be completely fatal going into the championship if they end up relegated. But you'd love to have some bit of momentum going into the summer, like to have a championship group with Cork, as they know very well, and Meath, who they beat in Intermediate All Ireland 2 years ago. And like if I'm sure that's the Meath game is the one they target, because if you probably win that, you're in an All Ireland quarter final, and like there's a bit of momentum behind you there too. So look, all is not lost, I think. But there's definitely way more progression in this Tipperary team at the moment. Or they're probably going to hit a stumbling block with, I suppose, the age profile of the team. They've done so much in such a short space of time with that young group of players, but they're probably going to hit a stumbling block at some stage in terms of just maybe their inexperience. When you look at the quality of the likes of Dublin and Cork and Galway, like they're playing to a level that I don't think we've seen in ladies football before.
Yeah, absolutely, and hopefully Tipperary can come out with some credit out of that game. Moving into the men's football side of things, so Tipperary lost last weekend to Offaly. It means that Offaly have topped Division 3 South. Limerick have come second on 4 points, of course, beating Tipperary a few weeks back. And Tipperary on 2 points will face a relegation playoff the weekend after next against Longford. Now Longford just got 1 point from their 3 games. That was a draw against Fermanagh, got beaten heavily by Derry and beaten by Cavan also. Just to reflect on the match last weekend, as I watched it, it just always felt like Tipperary were playing a little bit of catch-up, then get, level or thereabouts, and then Offaly would pull away again. 117 to 112 for a finish. Like, Offaly started well, finished well. What were your thoughts on the game, Shane?
Yeah, I don't think we can have any complaints with the result. I suppose it was disappointing the way it finished up. I suppose it was just, how would you say? I think Tipperary played into Offaly's hands. Like, there was no doubt throughout the game Offaly were playing with one, if not 2 sweepers. You had Niall Derby and you had Carl Stewart playing back in the sort of in front of the Tipp full forward line. And like, in fairness to Offaly, they had a very, very good game plan. It wasn't a defensive game plan. They used those 2 sweepers and then sort of to kickstart their attack. They had plenty of runners off the shoulder carrying the ball forward, and then in Bernard Allen and Cian Farrell, they had 2 terrific finishers. But I suppose taking the game into the last quarter, like, it was 1-11 apiece at the second water break. It was about who could get their nose in front and maybe sit on maybe a bit of a lead defensively. Look, I suppose Offaly were probably better set up for that. They drew Tipperary onto them. Like, Tipp had plenty of possession around the 45. They couldn't punch holes into that Offaly defence. They kicked a couple of poor long-range wides. And then when they did have the ball and were cheaply turned over, Offaly just had acres of space and they had to run into it. They had pacey guys coming off the shoulder. And look, they had Niall McNamee, who's still just a class act. Like, he kicked 3 points to play in 20 minutes off the bench. He also kicked 2 poor wides as well. They also had a goal chance. So look, the way Offaly were set up, they were able to hit Tipp on the counter attack in those last 10 or 15 minutes. And look, Tipp were struggling a bit at that stage. Like, Tipp had used 4 subs by half time, like 2 tactically and 2 for injury. And like, they ran out of numbers off the bench to bring on. Like, if Jack Kennedy ran out of juice towards the end. Like, he had started the game for the first time in over 6 months. Like, he just ran out of steam. Like, Kevin Fahey probably was brought on after 20 minutes, probably much earlier than the Tipp management had hoped. Bill Maher got 15 minutes off the bench, but he's a long way off his best at this stage. So just like Conal Kennedy and Stephen O'Brien were probably struggling a bit towards the end in the middle of the field, but they just didn't have the legs to bring on that. Or Tipp had actually brought on, I think they brought on 8, if not 9 players last weekend, including 2 blood subs. Just that's just the way it worked out. It was just a disappointing end to what has been a disappointing league. And look, it's not like this game on Sunday week against Longford is Tipp's key game of the year. Forget about the Munster semi-final against Kerry or Clare. Like, if Tipp are relegated, like, to get the players to be mentally pick themselves up for the Munster Championship would be so difficult. And you think after all they've done maybe the last 3 or 4 years, getting to Division 2, being a kick of a ball away from the Division 1, to potentially on Sunday week find yourself back in Division 4 will be such a psychological blow. Just hopefully that won't happen.
Killian, is there a bit of a Munster final, Munster title hangover win going on here? I mean, some of it's unfortunate. There were these injuries, and obviously Shane has outlined a couple of the players that came back. Michael Quinlivan didn't play. Now, there were a lot of wides in the game for Tipperary, so obviously that's a bit frustrating and something that they could affect out there. But is it a combination of like injuries, players not being 100% more so than something psychological because you won Munster last year and you take your foot off the gas?
Yeah, well, you just have to go back there and listen to the players that Shane said that weren't playing, and some that got to run off the bench, and some that maybe ran out a bit of juice because there's a little bit more being expected of them. I think you've got to understand that there's a number of players that have been introduced to the panel and have obviously come in and made a bit of a difference. Young Ryan from St. Bridget's in Dublin has obviously been a factor. I think I was talking to Shane on Twitter over the weekend there, and we were talking about young Bo from Temple Tui. Obviously has been a bit of a find as well. Obviously whether he'd be able to stay at the football would be a big factor going forward. But there has to be a little bit of a hangover. But I can't imagine it's all of it. And it has to be injury based and form based and whatever. I think the big target now for Tipperary is they can't go to Division 4. They have to win that game at all costs. Like, it's another Munster final for me. As Shane rightly said, and you can nearly discount championship because you imagine players would be disheartened. But you think trying to keep those guys going to the well again next year, if you're down in Division 4, to try then mount a challenge to come through the Munster Championship. I know Tipp like coming from the back door and they like coming from under the covers a little bit, but by God, that would be a long way to come from there. When you consider the quality of footballer that they have and the quality of players, it would be a long way. They have to stay in Division 3. They have to be targeting getting back to Division 2. I think that's where Tipperary football deserves to be, because I think they have the quality of footballer to do so. But I think I wouldn't necessarily say there's a psychological element. I just think there's players who are probably being asked to go to the well a little bit because there's a few gaps elsewhere, and you're talking about blooding a few new players, and you're talking about 3 or 4 players who I think, Shane, would be on any intercounty panel who are not able to fulfill a starting role at the moment. So to me, it's all about beating Longford, staying in Division 3, and then maybe, you know, a few weeks and getting a bit of a championship run together. But they just can't go to Division 4.
Yeah, I just take just pull up something what Killian said there. Like when you take Michael Quinlivan, like I mentioned Evan Comerford as well. He only played his first game of the league last weekend. If you take 5, it's not just 5 players out of your starting team. It's your 5, probably some of your best players. Like Tipp had an issue in the first 2 games against Wicklow and Offaly with the kickouts. Like Evan Comerford came back last weekend against Offaly. He only missed his target 3 times in the whole game. Like that was, I suppose, a disappointing point of view that if you're winning all bar 3 of your kickouts in the game and you're still not able to win it, that would be a disappointing factor. I'd argue that when Tipp weren't able to penetrate Offaly in the second half with runners for deep, you think last year's half back line was Bill Maher, Kevin Fahey and Robbie Kiley. None of them started the game last weekend. Bill and Kevin are trying to shake off injuries. Robbie Kiley, unfortunately, is gone for the year with a hamstring problem. Like, I don't hear Dublin can't afford to lose their first choice half back line. They would be weakened by that. And then look, Michael Quinlivan, we know he's a fabulous forward. Look, I don't think forward play has been the issue. Like Philip Ryan has showed enough to me to say if he gets enough possession, he's going to be quality. But it's just the way he took his points last week. I said it to somebody during the week, you watch the way Dublin shoot when they get close to goal. They actually move the ball from their hands to the foot so quickly. Conor Callahan, Dean Rock, Cormac Costello. When they make the decision, the ball, they even take the risk of somebody coming in blocking them out of it. The ball. Philip Ryan has the very same. You can see he's been in with Dublin. He's been in that top quality training environment where it's almost perfection. If he gets enough early ball, he's going to do a lot of damage. I know it's something David Power mentioned after the game, that their transition play from defence into the attack is not quick enough. But I suppose it's overall, even for the fact that we've struggled and we have the excuse of injuries, I suppose you'd love to see maybe Tipp kick on from last year and use that bit of momentum and to maybe get up to Division 2. And I suppose I just look at maybe what Clare have done over the last few years. I'd argue that Tipperary talent-wise are probably better than Clare, but the one thing Clare have is consistency. Like every day you go out, Clare you're going to get a certain level. Unfortunately, with this Tipperary team, it's either up or it's down here. You just don't know where the bottom level is. And look, Keane knows the Kildare scene, the Meath scene. Like Tipperary on their day are as good as Kildare or Meath, but look, that lack of consistency is not there. Like you look from Kildare, who could be promoted on Sunday week, probably down to maybe the Antrims and the Louds. There's absolutely nothing between probably about 20 teams in the National Football League. And unfortunately, Tipp are just in a situation at the moment where they're 1 defeat away from maybe falling into that bottom tier. Like, and it's just going to be so hard for them to pick up out of it. I was thinking there myself the other day, like if you're potentially planning for maybe road trips to Sligo and Leitrim next year, and no disrespect to those counties, you want to be maybe going to maybe a Cavan or a Monaghan or a Navan, or just psychologically, it's just so different to get yourself up for those levels.
And just to even talk about the opposition, we'll talk about it more again next week, but Pádraig Davis, the manager of Longford, he was talking about not being able to give panel members enough of a chance. He goes, for obvious reasons and the lack of challenge games, you're carrying bigger panels, but you just can't get game time into them. That's unfortunate because some of them have worked very hard and we're not going to see that. Experimenting is not an option for us in competitive games, and it's a negative that we can't give these players more opportunities. That is a tough one for most teams out there, especially with the condensed nature of the league. So it's probably it's probably hard for players to break through. But for Tipperary, Shane, I'd love you to take up the point on Conor Bowley. We saw him with the Tipp under-20 hurlers last year. He was very, very good at times. And I thought maybe he'd step up even with the senior hurlers this year. But obviously David Power has nabbed him instead. So Philly Ryan is obviously in the team at the moment. He's kind of laying down a marker. But Conor Bowley, how good is he? He scored a couple of points last weekend.
I think he's... I've seen from what I've seen of him now, he looks like a fabulous footballer. Like I hadn't seen him at club level before. Like, and I suppose he was a surprise addition to the football squad. But look, from football people I know, his talent alone deserves to be in there. I think we all expected maybe that he would have got called into the senior hurling panel at the start of the year, and I think if that call had come, that's where he would have gone. But look, he didn't get it. David Power made the call, and then he's going. And look, if he ends up maybe playing hurling down the road, look, a year or two with the footballers in terms of doing strength and condition and stuff, won't do him any harm. And look, he kicked 2 absolutely fabulous points against Offaly. The first one, I don't know if you saw it on League Sunday last weekend. It was actually probably the most purest Gaelic football point you'll see. Evan Comerford, 70-yard kick out. Conor Bowley caught it over the head of the wing back. Soloed forward 30 yards, kicked the ball over the bar from 40 yards with his left foot. It was the most simplistic Gaelic football point that you never see anymore. Like, it was just perfection. I think he's that sort of a player where if he gets in behind an opposition of 45, he won't be scared to have a shot. Like, so look, I think if Tipp can get to a situation, hopefully maybe get Michael Quinlivan back on the field in the next couple of weeks. You have Sweeney, you have Ryan, you have Conor Bowley. Like, you have 4 forwards there who can score if they can get enough ball. And I say it's up to David Power, Paddy Christie, and the selectors over the next few weeks to find a way to speed up the transition from defence into attack. And it was a question I posed in the paper a few weeks ago, and I said, I think off the cuff football suits this Tipperary team much more than maybe straight jacking them into a system. And like sometimes it's maybe you got to play the hand you're dealt, and that quality of players we have. And like Killian would have seen a lot of these Tipp players as youngsters up through the age grades too. They're and I've always noticed them since minor level, and I suppose it was why they probably won the All-Ireland Minor Championship. A lot of these guys in 2011, they're just better when they're allowed to express themselves. They're just better when they take a risk. We're not good defensively, probably to be, even if we focused so much on defensive football and we got it right. I still think we'd be weak defensive. I just think we're so better going forward and taking a chance. And look, we saw it last year when they played Cork in the Munster final. They took off the shackles and went for it. And even in the All-Ireland semi-final against Mayo, and you could argue Mayo maybe pulled up the reins, maybe they started the second half. I thought Tipp maybe when they just decided the second half we go for it, and that they cut Mayo open. Like, Tipp should have probably had 7 or 8 goals if they were on target in the second half. I just think maybe just offensive football suits this Tipperary team more. And look, you could lose more games than you win, but look, I just think like offensively it just shoots the games we have, that maybe you take a risk and look, maybe you'll end up winning more games you lose that way. I don't know.
There's part of me that thinks I agree with you, because we do have very good forward players, and even last year against Mayo, Tipperary, if you wanted to, you could actually say that there was 10 goal scoring opportunities in that game. But then I think of the likes of Dublin, and I think they used to be like that as well, going to try and shoot the lights out, but it was only when they brought a bit more patience into their game. So maybe part of it too is there's a balance to find. So it's not easy, Killian.
No, it's not easy, but it's one of the reasons why I loved following the Tipperary footballers, is that you just never knew that what was going to turn up in lots of ways. So, you know, your emotions could be thrown anywhere. And it was probably great because you weren't going there kind of thinking, oh, right, this is going to be, you know, just mundane kind of stuff. Maybe kick 12 points, get out the gap, good luck. Like Tipp could go out on any given day and they could take on Dublin and they could score 5 goals, you know, or whatever, you know. And I've heard of Tipp play, you know, challenge matches against some of the top teams that would be classed as top teams in the country and give them the feel of it. And, you know, that's why I just go back to what Shane rightly mentioned there about Clare, Tipperary and Clare. How many times I got to see them in the league and the championship over the years that I was down in Tipp. And Tipperary, I would say, won, Shane, safe to say 75% of those, and are as good as, if not better. And yet people are talking about the David Tubrides and rightly so, don't forget, and some of these Clare footballers, and Tipperary have as good of footballers. And I'm sick to the back teeth of telling people up this part of the world about how good Tipperary footballers actually are. The problem is that you can't probably put enough trust in them that on the day that those people will turn up to see them, that they will turn up in the guys that you know that they can turn up in. But as Shane rightly mentioned, you let them off the shackles, by God, watch out, because they have no regard for anybody. When they just want to play a ball, they just go at it. And yeah, maybe Shane is right. Maybe we should just have a Kevin Keegan Newcastle feel about it and just go all out.
Well, like I would give them something, and like I've said it even since 2016. The one time you think the bubble is going to burst in Tipperary football, they always rein you back in, and you just think that maybe that on Sunday week, like maybe the fact that they have to go to Longford is probably no bad thing. They're going into the Lions then. I'm fairly sure that because of the clash of colours, we're going to be seeing those famous jerseys from Páirc Uí Chaoimh last year. And look, they're 2 from 2 in those jerseys. Maybe it's going to work out. We'll be 3 from 2, and we'll save our bacon for another year. So hopefully that's going to be the case. Those lucky green and white hoop jerseys.
Without question, they're glorious to look at too. The Tipperary hurlers are back out this weekend against Westmeath, and just to sort of frame the context for anyone who hasn't been keeping up with it, Tipperary have 2 draws against Limerick and Cork and a win against Galway from their 3 outings. 3 tough games, 3 of the main challengers. Westmeath have played 3 games. Now, they ran a much changed Watford pretty close in one of the games, losing by 3 points, but they got very heavily beaten in their other 2 games. Their scoring differential is -66 after 3 games. So the main question is not, I mean, I know that they pushed Tipperary close in a qualifier a few years back, and that was a Tipp team that wasn't exactly motoring well, but Westmeath were possibly going a little bit better at the time. Do you think this is a good opportunity to give a lot of the lads some game time, Shane, or are we actually too close to the Munster Championship at this stage and you want to get form into the main men?
I was something I posed in the Guardian this week. I don't think Liam is going to make wholesale changes. I think he'll give Westmeath the respect they deserve. I think he'll do what he's done in the 3 games so far. I'd say he'll make somewhere between 4 and 6 changes. I think there will be some players that will get game time we haven't seen so far. I expect Brian Hogan to get the start between the goals if he's recovered from concussion. He had to pull out of the Galway game with a concussion, so you'd expect him to get a run. I would say after 2 substitute appearances, we'll probably see Brendan Maher maybe get a start just to get a more of a run into his legs. I think Seamus Callanan is earmarked for a return in this game too, whether he starts or off the bench. I think we'll see him during the course of the game. But I think there'll be a balance between experience and maybe blooding some more players. It's the last thing you want to do. And look, we saw it with Waterford, as mentioned, against Westmeath a few weeks ago. Liam Cahill made 12 changes. Very, very inexperienced team went out there. Just got over the line by 3 points. They had to send on the likes of Kevin Moore there in the second half to help steady the ship. So I don't think Liam Sheedy wants to be in a situation that maybe 10 minutes into the second half they're having a bit of difficulty. I think you'll still see a core group of experience out there. There might be a couple of guys rested. I think like Cahill Barrett and Seamus Kennedy and Ronan Maher played, I think, nearly every minute of the 3 games so far. I don't think those 3 guys need to play this weekend. I think I'd hold them in reserve for the Waterford game. I definitely think that Waterford game, I wouldn't write it off as just potentially being a Munster semi-final curtain raiser. Whereas I know last weekend that there definitely was an element of shadow boxing, maybe what Davy Fitzgerald put out against Kilkenny, potentially for a rematch in a Leinster semi. I think Tipperary need to go to Walsh Park somewhere close to full strength for that last league game. Okay, if you win and you're playing Watford in a Munster semi-final, you have a psychological advantage. If you lose, it might expose maybe something you have 4 weeks to remedy for potentially playing Watford again in the Munster Championship. So I don't think Tipp have anything to lose going down to Watford with the following weekend with a near full strength team. So that's why I think there's an element this weekend for Liam maybe to maybe give some of the extended panel a run out and keep guys fresh for Sunday week down in Walsh Park.
Cork put 7-27 on Westmeath a couple of weeks ago. A couple of players played well. I mean, Westmeath do have some decent forwards in there. They have a couple of decent players throughout the field, but they are finding it very tough going at the moment. And if Cork can score 7-27, now they are a team with massive pace, and if you are a little bit off their level, they're probably going to punish you. But it could get ugly again for Westmeath.
It could, yeah, and I would rightly say and agree with what you said there earlier on with regards to Westmeath were in a better position when they took on Tipperary in the qualifier a few years ago. I think I remember Killian Doyle putting in a performance against Seamus Canlan that night that, a lot of people were talking about, who is this guy? Where did he come from? But
Tommy Doyle, yeah.
Westmeath and Leinster would have heard of him before, but, that he just goes to show you that they do have quality, but unfortunately, they just seem to have shifted, and I'm not sure maybe that everything is completely happy in that camp either, from what I hear. I'm just laughing at what Shane said there, though, that Liam is probably going to run some of his panel in, and you're talking about Brian Hogan, Brendan Maher, and Seamus Canlan coming in. If you're the Westmeath lads, you'd be thinking, Christ above, what do we have to do? He's running his panel, but. Yeah, it just goes to show you that Liam Sheedy has seen an opportunity. Well, I suppose injuries probably played a part. There's other guys that got in getting game time. That's obviously all important. You would factor that they're going to have changes, all right. But Westmeath going into that game after shipping everything that they have, I suppose, again, they would be attempting to put on a performance, but I don't think Liam Sheedy is going to do what Liam Cahill did and have wholesale changes, as Shane rightly pointed out. I think you will see, obviously, an opportunity for some guys to get game time, but the bigger fish to fry is obviously Waterford the following week, and I think he'll show all the respect to Westmeath, but I think they'll win it comfortably. I think you'll see a strong enough Tipp team out, and probably with wholesale changes after probably the second water break.
And Shane, like Cork will be playing Limerick on Saturday night, and if let's say Limerick win that game, they obviously haven't been flying just at the moment. Tipperary can put themselves in a great position to sort of go on and try and win this league. And there's been no league title since 2008. There are only 3 big titles available to win on a given year. So do you put much importance in winning the league?
I put importance on trying to finish the league as positive as I can. And it was interesting that Liam Sheedy actually referenced the league title actually in the post-match press conference and after the Galway match. So I think he will probably not shy back from the fact that maybe like only Seamus Canlan of the current panel has a league medal, and that's 13 years ago, so it's a long time. So like as you say, if Tipperary win this weekend, and all depends on Cork, even if Cork do win this weekend, their final matches against Galway, Cork have 2 very, very tough matches to finish with. So it's still in Cork's hands. But look, it'd be interesting to see what teams both Cork and Limerick put out this weekend. I was surprised if John Kiley doesn't go strong in this game and thinking that we've got to get a handle on how to play this new style Cork running game, because look, I don't think there's any risk for Limerick in this one. If they struggle with it, they have 3 weeks to get ready to rectify it, and I don't think another loss is going to do Limerick any harm. Look, if it does, it opens the gate for Tipperary. They'll get the win this weekend against Westmeath, and then you go down to Walsh Park. Probably it was sort of a championship feel to it. If Waterford beat Galway this weekend, which could happen, it could be a league final playoff between Tipperary and Waterford. And look, sure, wouldn't that be a cracking incentive for both sides? I was just looking on the other side. I think if Kilkenny win this weekend against Laois, I think that's that group sorted. I don't think they can be caught in Division 1B because they'd have the head-to-head over both Dublin and Wexford. So look, who wouldn't like to think that maybe an All-Ireland semi or All-Ireland final against Kilkenny later this summer would be for all the marbles in this year's championship, league and championship. Wouldn't it be brilliant? So
it would, to be fair. And also, it's not that I think winning the league title, would be massive because it's a league title, but just because there's only so many things you can win, and Tipperary are the record league holders. So why not extend that? Because, Kilkenny have been chasing that down for a number of years now. So it'd be nice to keep them back.
Plus, you're guaranteed a share of it if you don't end up meeting the other team. So look, if you do finish top, you have Well, I don't know, you got half a medal or what, but it'll go down in the record books that you'll be a National League winner in 2021.
Yeah, maybe do a timeshare in the middle between the likes of Pádraig Walsh and Cathal Barrett. Do you think, Killian, Tipperary have found a couple of players this year going into Championship? Because, last year there was certainly a couple of holes in the team in the big days, especially, against Limerick especially, that Tipperary looked like they needed an injection of youth.
Yeah, well, what seems to impress me with regards to the matches, even though that obviously there were draws, is the ability to go to the well and to keep going to the wire, and obviously that's obviously a Liam Sheedy trait that this group of players seem to have. I've been impressed with the leadership of Jason Ford this year. There's no question about that. Great to see, as we said, opportunities for others. Even starting with Barry Hogan in goal and whatever. Lots of young players that we have seen through the ranks over the years starting to get their opportunity. I think Liam has used that well, and the fact then that they got results out of it has obviously put them in a prime situation. And I was just about to jump in there and Shane and say, why wouldn't Tipp go all out now to win this league? I think because of the closeness of the league and Championship, I think it's top quality games. Like you're preparing yourself very, very well for a Munster Championship. I'm sure Tipp are not at full pelt yet, because obviously the Munster Championship is going to take a hell of a lot out of the legs in preparation for an All-Ireland. But to me, because of the closeness of it, why not go all out for it now at this point? I think it's maybe fallen into place for Tipperary. And as you rightly said, I'm sure it irks Tipperary followers and probably Liam Sheedy a little bit that it has been so long since they won the league title. I know there's been All-Irelands annexed in that time, and that's obviously the big one. But who's to say you couldn't go out and win both this year? What I've been impressed with, as answering your question, would be that a lot of those young players have come in and haven't let the side down. I don't think there's any guy being found wanting in taking on the opportunity. So, maybe, as I said, that you could factor in the 2 points against Westmeath this weekend. You head to Walsh Park. I think if I was Liam Sheedy now, I'd be going all out for this league title.
Just in terms, I just always throw it out to the Perry. Like, I just wonder, like we all want more top end teams in the top end competing for the big title. I just wonder, like, we've seen Westmeath struggle. I know that they've been unfortunate that they've been in the tough end of 1A with the likes of Limerick, Tipp and Galway. Like, I just wonder, and you see the likes of Laois maybe struggling. Maybe it's the fact that maybe they have a new manager coming in, and I know Cheddar would know an awful lot of those players, and it's going to get time to bed in. Antrim got off to a good start. I just wonder, do we see the likes of the Laois and the Antrims and the Westmeaths and even the Kildares? I know there's a lot of work being done up in your neck of the woods, Killian, to try and improve things. Do we ever see a new Offaly? Maybe Offaly will come back in a few times. Just a new team entering the club, or do these beatings actually end up doing more harm than good? It's hard to know at this stage.
If I can jump in there,
and I think from a Westmeath, sorry Shane, cutting across you there. I just think from a Westmeath point of view that it probably would have suited them a couple of years ago. They changed their management, and to me, they're a little, they seem to be a little unsettled since, even though obviously they are competing at the top level this year. I'm not sure those beatings are going to aid them in any way. I'm sure they were looking for performances apart from the game against Waterford, though. They've shipped so much. Psychologically, it has to be big. I just wonder, would there be an opportunity maybe that Division 1B is maybe outside, you take the top 6 out of it. So Kilkenny or Wexford shouldn't be in it. And it should be maybe a development step from moving up along the line to get to Division 1A. That Division 1 becomes Division 1. Don't call it A. Just call it Division 1. And I know that's what we had previously, and then it was decided to divide it. But I don't think Westmeath are learning anything from taking big beatings from all these counties. And no matter what people say that they want to come to and play the top counties, but would it not be better to be playing maybe those that are just behind the top 6, let's say, and developing from that level, and then getting the promotion and having a crack at it? I just find Division 1B is it's Kilkenny and Wexford. That's it. At least Laois and Dublin, I'm not sure they're completely at the whole races either. It's not helping Laois in there. The way things are at the moment. I know obviously Cheddar, there's been change that has had an impact, but I think Laois were a better team 2 years ago. I suppose I'm unsure why Cheddar went back in there, to be honest with you. I just find that Westmeath and Laois are not learning anything in Division 1, for me personally anyway, at this moment. Maybe 2 years ago, yeah, but I just think at their current state, I'm not sure that they are. So I just wonder, should we revisit the look at the shape of Division 1, A and B, and maybe, as I said, use it as a stepping stone. That some of those counties then who are probably too good for Division 2A or 2B that are able then to progress to Division and play the Kilkennys, the Tipps, the Galways, whatever, in a better state, let's say.
Yeah, there's a couple of points in that worth taking up. I think Westmeath, you're right, they're a little bit off what they were a couple of years ago. I'll probably have to defend fellow Coola clubmate Shane O'Brien, who's the manager, and say, like, they couldn't have got a worse possible setup than being a group with Cork, Galway, Tipperary, Watford, Limerick, and maybe Antrim would have struggled likewise in there. Now, the flip side, they've done very, very well, beating Clare and pushing Kilkenny rather close. So, maybe that's not the perfect comparison there. But another suggestion I've seen, I agree with you, make the league a little bit more developmental, because there's no point in the team coming up and getting absolutely hockeyed. Maybe if it was like a more even spread, that you had a team that's maybe 1, 3, 5, 7 in the rankings, and then 2, 4, 6, 8 in the rankings. So it's a bit more of an even spread. The other thing that I couldn't help but think of when you were talking there, Killian, was how difficult it must be for those players to develop in that Westmeath team or Laois or whatever team is getting hockeyed. Because I always think of like some of the A versus B games that we would have had in training there for the couple of years when, Coola were winning Club All-Irelands, and I'd have been firmly on the B team. But, you're sitting there at times in the back, and you're up against the best club team in Ireland, right, in training. And you're like, probably it's the guts of an intermediate team. And because you're getting beaten so heavily, your mentality very much goes into a situation of, well, look, I'm not going to concede a goal here. So you actually start defending your player from behind, because you're like, I'm just not letting him in behind me. And you move away from the stage of being that sort of back or that player that tries to get out in front or that tries to do things to win the game. You're just constantly thinking defensively. And I wonder if even that sort of thing infects a mentality after a while, and you actually sort of shrink as a player. You don't go out to win, you go out to try and stem the flow. So that'll be my thoughts on it, Shane.
Yeah, I just it's an interesting one. I suppose we've constantly tweaked with the National League. I think it was 10 years ago, it was the top 8, it was the best 8 teams in it, and then they split it into, then I think was it Limerick were constantly on the outside, they could never get promoted, and then it had to be changed, and then it was 6 teams in 1A and 1B, and then all the league winners kept coming from 1B. I think for about 3 years was 1A was dog eat dog, and 1B you were less. I suppose you didn't have to go to the well too often. You were fresher then for the league, for the latter stage of the league and into the championship. So I think they'll probably stick with it as well. I think some of the likes of Westmeath probably are going to lose out on. It's not within the group. Is that, like, you can imagine in a normal year, Tipperary going up to Mullingar, and the kids in Mullingar go and watch Seamus Callan playing in TG Cusick Park. Like, they never got that before, like, and they missed out on that all of last year. And the same in Laois, like, they got the momentum from 2019. Like, never didn't get the really big games last year, the big crowds, maybe where you could tap into. And like, I know from maybe a selfish point of view, I'd love for the league maybe to stay where it is next year, and maybe potentially Tipp have to go to Belfast. I'd love to go up there and experience the passion for hurling. I think we have to maybe play the long game. I think we probably saw it this year with Antrim be able to beat Clare at home. Maybe that's going to be the only shock result in Division 1 we get this year. And look, if that's all it is, it'll probably have been a success. But I think we've got to maybe just stick with it for another while. Like, there's probably a chance that I think Offaly are probably going to come back up this year. Look, Offaly are going to come back up, probably better able to be a bit more competitive in Division 1 next year. So hopefully it might be, we probably won't have, there probably will still be beatings, but they'll probably be, they'll have that bit of tradition that makes them a little more competitive when you know in the field. I just think it's maybe maybe have to live with some of these hammerings, maybe for long term, maybe in terms of the players involved for maybe those Laois and West we might like, but maybe long term playing against the better players, they'll start learning. They'll learn more from them overall.
Absolutely. So I think that's it for episode 5 of TippCast. So thanks very much to Killian Whelan and Shane. We'll do it again next week. And for the rest of you, please get your comments in if there's anything you'd like us to talk about in the next show. Thanks, lads.
Good to see you, lads.
Thanks for having me, lads.
Welcome to TippCast by the Nina Guardian.